Welcome to Session Sunday. Hi guys, it's Jack Edwards, and in this week's video we're going to be taking a look at defensive shape. But before we get into this week's video, make sure to leave us a like and subscribe, and if you missed last week's video, click on the link above. Okay, so moving into the first part of this week's session, okay, we're going to be taking a look at defensive shape in terms of making sure we're not allowing passes through. Okay, so it's a bit more broken down before we go into some small-sided games. But before we get into it, let's have a look at how many players we're working with this week and the equipment that we'll be using. So in terms of players for this week, in total, we're going to have 14 outfield players plus our goalkeeper. Now, for the first part of the session, you can let the goalkeeper get warmed up, do some individual stuff. Obviously, if you have a goalkeeping coach, etc., or a parent who can work with them, or you can just get them involved with the drill, which we'll speak about in a second. In terms of equipment, we're going to be focusing on using balls, bibs, cones, and then obviously for some small-sided goals, you can use poles as well. Now, if you have flat markers, they'd be perfect to use because we're going to be setting out different areas of the pitch as well. But if you don't have them, that's fine. Now, in terms of the setup for this part of the session, okay, in terms of depth, we're just going to go 15 yards and we're going to have 20 yards of width, okay? Just so it's a little bit wider, okay, for the players that are here to move, to shuffle across, but then the depth isn't too far as well. So you're going to split the group into two groups of 7. Now, you can do this in two ways. You can either do a unit of 4 or a unit of 3. So if you had a unit of 3, you then have 4 players here and obviously 3 in the middle. Obviously, we're doing a unit of 4. So what the focus is here, the Reds are aiming to keep the ball, okay, and we're happy for them doing this, but what we don't want to do is lose our shape and then allow passes into this. When this ball comes into here, the players are allowed to move along the lines, okay? So if we don't get across to this quickly, okay, and block the appropriate passes, okay, block the forward pass, okay, then that would be on, okay, and we don't want that to happen. What we want is keep the opposition going here. So we're forcing them, okay, sideways, and backwards, okay, at all times. Let that ball travel across, okay, and then try and pinch it. Now, what the opposition can score a point is that if they manage to play a forward pass, okay, so it can be if they manage to break a line, so play into this line, then if they get it here, then they can do it. So if they manage to play on an open line, they can score. Now, every time the Blues win it back, so if they force a pass into an area where they can pinch it, that can be a point as well. And you can look to swap players over every few minutes to give them obviously chances of defending. So what you're trying to focus on here is making sure that we're shuffling and sliding as a unit. Okay, so when the ball comes to this player here, okay, nearest player gets out. Then we're forming that barrier around it, not staying on a straight line, okay, because then passes will be able to come through. Making sure that we're coming and dropping in here, okay, so protecting that space in behind. When it comes back centrally, okay, we can all step up in there, and then if a player looks to go into here, okay, we're not doing overhead height, okay, it's got to be on the floor or obviously below head height to try and play it, so then the players here get across. Again, we're forcing that ball, okay, to go backwards. Now, if you had the goalkeeper involved, you could just put them on this line here, and it could then be every time the opposition get played through, that's when you can see the point. And obviously, if you've done a unit of 3, it'd be the same as again. So obviously, for here, putting pressure on, making sure that we're not getting played through. Okay, so it's just making sure that we're breaking it down into the basics. You're focusing on the angles and distances, covering the ground quickly, okay, and then making sure that our shape, okay, all the players are doing their jobs and keeping the spaces in between quite narrow. We will now move into our first animation before moving on to part 2 of this week's session. Now moving into part 2 of this week's session, we're now moving into the first of our 2 small-sided games. Now, in this one, we're focusing on stepping, dropping, holding the line as a unit, shuffling and sliding, okay, and making sure we're defending in the right area of the pitch, depending on where the ball is. Now, in terms of the setup, you want to be working based off half a pitch, okay? So the 18-yard box is going to be out of bounds, basically. So no one's going to be going in there because we're focusing on not dropping into that area unless the ball is in these areas here, okay? Now, it's going to be 8 versus 6 plus the goalkeeper. So you're going to have a bigger goal here, okay? and then 3 smaller ones here, which, like I said before, can be set out by using by poles. Okay. Now, we spoke about defensive lanes before. Okay, so lane 1, lane 2, lane 3, lane 4, and we want to be. What the lane we want to be in is in position where the ball is. So if the ball's in lane 1, okay, our players should be in lanes 1 and 2 mainly, okay, with obviously the players on the far side, okay, in lane 3, just about, okay, so we're defending that area of the pitch. If the ball's right out here, okay, right on the touchline, obviously players are going to be even more across, okay, which means even closer to the central area of the pitch. Now, for the opposition, you want the 2 players here to stay central. This player stay wide, this player stay wide, and then these 2 players looking to get on the ball in between the lines. Now, it's important for us that when the ball moves back to here, okay, so we send the ball backwards, that when the midfielders step, okay, to put pressure on it, that the back 4 step as well, because if the back 4 don't step and they just shuffle back into position here, okay, they're going to leave space in between the lines, which means these players can pick the ball up and turn, okay. In a game, they can turn and go forward towards the big goal, and here, they can turn and play through the lines and score. So it's important that when the ball, okay, travels backwards, we step up as a team, okay, to defend the ball, okay, in these areas, okay, we're reducing space in between the lines. So we're making it difficult for these players to receive the ball. We show it sideways again, okay, and again, look, we start to shuffle across into the more central areas, maintain our line, okay, and then when the ball goes wide again, we get across quickly to put pressure on the ball carrier, okay, and as a unit again, we shuffle and slide, okay, making it difficult and preventing those forward passes. Now, it's important for the midfielders that they don't jump ahead of the ball. So if this player's got the ball here, okay, and the centre back there, if this player jumps out too early, okay, and leaves that space, then there's a ball through in between the lines. Whereas if they screen the pass into there, when the ball travels to there and you want to put pressure on it, that's when they can put the pressure on. And then the players around that, okay, you can step up and sense that, okay, there's a chance we can win this ball back here. So then if the ball then comes across to here and gets played into there, that's when we can look to get 2 players on it, okay. But again, if these players aren't stepping up, okay, it's going to be difficult to win that ball back. Whereas if we do step up and the ball comes into an area here, we can look to pinch it and score. Now, a rule to bring in for the Blues, okay, is that when they get the ball back, they get 5 seconds to score. Because what we're focusing on is when we win the ball back in these areas here, can we look to go forward quickly on transition? Okay, so in a game, can we look to get into the opposition half? Because they've been moving, okay, quite a lot defending, okay, they're going to want to try and keep the ball. Okay, but in a game, if they try and keep it too much, okay, there's going to be a high chance that they give it away. Whereas in a game, we want to try and go forward and score. So when they get the ball back, 5 seconds to score. Brilliant, get a goal. Then we can set back up again, okay, get into our shape. And then again for the Reds, they'll look to try and play the ball through. So for the Reds, they're looking to move it quickly, open out and play forward. Okay, if that's not on, try and recycle the ball. For the Blues, if the ball's in central areas, okay, we defend in central areas. When the ball goes wide, we're out wide to defend it, okay, but we're still covering those central areas as well, reducing the space in between the lines, making it difficult, okay, making sure that players aren't jumping out ahead of the ball to leave the space in between the lines, okay. We're screening those passes in, and then we can step up at the right times to try and win the ball back. We will now move into our next animation before moving on to the final part of this week's session. Okay, now moving into the final part of this week's session, we're now moving into the second of our small-sided games, which is going to be focusing on trying to force mistakes, okay, and prevent the forward passes. So the setup for this, okay, so in terms of the depth, this area here is going to be between 20 and 25. This middle area here is 15, and this area here is 10 yards. Now the width can be between 25 and 30 yards again. So you're going to have your 2 teams of 7 plus the goalkeeper. So the 2 players in here are going to be they have to stay in here, okay, in possession of the ball, out of possession, free to move. These players are able to drop in and obviously move into different areas, okay, but we're just trying to set it more off in terms of for the defensive side. So the Reds are trying to work the ball into this area to score. The Blues, okay, when the centre back or centre midfielders in here have got the ball, they're looking to force the ball into areas where they can look to get over, okay, and put pressure on the ball, Okay, to then obviously prevent them playing forward, play back, and then when they do try and play forward, if a player drops in, then can we lock on, okay, show the ball backwards, get round the ball again, okay, and then when the ball comes into these areas, try and win it back and score as quick as we can. Now you can do this in two different ways, either focusing on having like a front three or a front four with players in behind, or obviously like a midfield three with the defenders in behind there as well. So you could always have these two players as your full backs, these two players as midfielders or defenders, and then you can either work on obviously a midfield three or a front three. So when these players here have got the ball, when the ball goes wide, okay, and the player looks obviously to go in and press the ball in here, okay, we want to make sure that the player who's highest in here stays on line with the ball here, doesn't drop too deep, because then you've got to get all the way back out here, okay, so making sure that this player can't receive it, form that barrier, okay, around the ball, so when it goes higher, this player can look to step up, okay, we can step with it, and make it more difficult for the opposition. So again, if a ball goes into this player here, if this player drops into this area and this player's got the ball, okay, then we're looking for these players to be thinking about locking on. So this player's going to screen the pass, okay, out to there. When they screen this pass, okay, full-back can lock onto here, centre-backs can lock on in here, full-backs come across, and we get players in here preventing those passes. Okay, so we're focusing on our shape in terms of not allowing the players to play forward, letting that ball travel wide, and then when it goes back to here, we can look to step up then, okay, and put more pressure on the opposition, okay, because we're going to try and tell them, okay, try and play through here. When you do, okay, we're going to have players around the ball, okay, making it difficult for you to try and play through. So we're not stepping ahead of the ball like we spoke about before and letting that pass in, okay, screening the passes into areas where we can look to put pressure on it, okay, and make it difficult for the opposition. When we win it back, can we find our route to goal quickly to try and score? So get the ball up the pitch. So again, angles and distances, stepping, dropping, holding as a unit, okay? Making sure we're screening the passes, checking our shoulders, being aware of the space and the players around us, okay? And making sure we're staying focused so that when a ball does go past us or the ball does get played through, we're not just letting another one go through, letting our heads drop, our heads go in the air, okay? React to it, and then can we look to get ourselves back in shape for the next pass? We'll now move into our final animation before concluding this week's session. Thanks for watching this week's video. Don't forget to head over to our website where you can sign up to view all of our exclusive content. And we'll see you next week for another Session Sunday.